Welcome back. When President Trump steps to the podium tonight, there will be yet another investigation ramping up around him. Now, this one involves his inauguration. Subpoenas, they have just been issued asking for records from the Inaugural Committee. Now, when it was disclosed, the committee raised a record $107 million for his inauguration. It raised more than a few eyebrows, especially since the campaign always had trouble raising money. Also, where did all that money go that they raised for the inauguration? Now, his was certainly smaller than the ones that came before it, and it also had a lot less star power. Now, investigators particularly are interested in whether any foreigners illegally donated to the committee, and they also requested all records from both vendors and contractors. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, he was asked about this, and as a reminder, he headed up the transition for a while there for Donald Trump. And he said that this could be a huge concern for President Trump. And bear in mind here, Christie not only had a role there in the campaign, but he was also a one-time U.S. attorney. Take a listen.
These subpoenas are coming from the Southern District of New York to the Inaugural Committee. What do you think of that?
I've always thought that that was the bigger problem for two reasons. One, because the Southern District of New York has no restrictions on their purview. Right? Bob Mueller has a task. It's Russian interference and potential collusion in the 2016 election. Southern District of New York is whatever the heck you want. And so,
particularly if you find stuff.
That's right. And you've got Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer, as a tour guide. That means you could go anywhere.
Well, the perfect person to talk about this, too, joins me now, former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. And Roland, you know, I just want to give a little context, because we're at the midway point of the Trump administration in terms of this first term. These are a fraction of the probes here. But among the things that are being investigated by Mueller now and other investigators include the Trump presidency, the Trump inauguration, the Trump Foundation, the Trump transition, the Trump administration, and I can go on and on and on. You go into that when you extend into the Southern District of New York and so many other players that now they're looking in this particular case against conspiracy against the U.S., false statements, again, wire fraud, mail fraud. The scope of this, before we look at this particular investigation, I sometimes think we lose the forest for the trees. My God, there's not an aspect of this administration, and everything always has the word Trump in front of it, that is not being probed for one malfeasance or another. It's really amazing.
It is, Richard. It's as if Mr. Trump just can't do anything the right way, right? He just can't do it according to the law. So we'll have to wait and see what this latest, inauguration subpoena turns up. But remember, the government not only has Michael Cohen as a tour guide, they've got Rick Gates as a tour guide. He was the chair of the Inauguration Committee. They've got Maria Butina, who was a guest at the inauguration, as someone who can talk about it. They've already gotten a guilty plea from a man named Sam Patton for surreptitiously and illegally putting Russian money into the inauguration festivities. So there's every reason to think that this will be one more big, dirty ball of criminality, and it'll just take the Southern District some time to unravel it. We'll have to wait and see.
And I know this has been something that you've been looking at for a while that could be a big problem for the president. As you heard Christie say, whatever Mueller's marching orders were as to the probe or the limits thereof, there are no such limitations here to the Southern District. They go where they want to go. And as you said, there's a whole lot of players involved. I'm going to give my dime store theory to this, and then feel free to poke holes in it or take it in another direction. But I firmly believe, like all of us, Donald Trump never thought he was going to win this thing. Now, whatever his aspirations beyond this, whether it was a Trump network or whatever else, almost irrelevant for this conversation. But he certainly didn't think that it was going to end the way it did in November of 16. And to that end, all the things that preceded this, as we now have learned here, nobody would lend him money. Even the Deutsche Banks of the world, all right, which certainly have allegations of filth that were attached to them for a long time. If you go back a long time, the only people that would put money into Trump to keep him afloat were either Russian oligarchs or people connected to it. You then have the campaign and everything that went in, and so far the revelations that have come forward. But still, whether it was compromise or whatever else, Trump was in a box at that point. And everything that has gone on since then, and the inexplicable defense of Putin and all the other things that have gone in, attempting to remove here some of the embargoes and some of the restrictions that we've had on the Russians to this point, everything makes sense if you put it in the context of he's got to keep paying the piper. And to that end, how do you do it? You have to wash money. He did that when he had properties, both residential and commercial. There's a way you can move a property, you can move a house, you can move condos, you can move apartments, have money come in, have money come out. Then you have something like the inauguration. And the idea that at a presidential inauguration, with all the attention at the time, that he would try to use that as a cash cow, as if no one would look under the rug, I think is exhibit A to who we are dealing with and the people that he's surrounded himself with. To me, Roland, in some ways, this makes sense if you connect the dots and it's completing a circle. It's not crazy to me. It kind of fits a pattern.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Richard. I mean, it's clear that the Russians have some kind of information on or relationship with Mr. Trump that seems to cause him to do some of the things he does. The other thing that just becomes clearer every day is how utterly incompetent Mr. Trump and the people that work with him are. You know, whether it's nominating somebody that's completely unsuited to the job, or, you know, anything he does in just an incompetent manner. And he's done that over and over again with his role as president. And that's true of his inauguration committee and everything else he's ever done. He's just so incompetent. And he makes one terrible mistake after another. I mean, no competent person would allow the Russians to put the money into the inauguration that they did. But here we are. And it was one more great investment for the Russians because on the one hand, it's compromise because Trump, if confronted with this, could be extorted with the fact that he'd committed a crime. And on the other hand, you're kind of buying the guy off by giving him a bunch of money, which no doubt flowed out the back door to him. So it was a double banger for the Russians, a great investment in every way.
And I want to come back to something we spoke about last night, which is you said the next shoe to drop potentially could be Donnie Jr. or family members. Now, one of the things is that with the inauguration and so many of these pieces, there was family involvement throughout, and there was exposure for family throughout. And a name that we haven't talked about in a long time is the Alan Weisselbergs of the world. They've cooperated with the Mueller probe, and he knows where everybody is buried. Hopefully, I'm just talking financially, for the last 40 years within the Trump organization, and he's playing ball here. So my point is, they have copies of every check. They have the money trails, I would imagine, if you're Mueller, and now if you're the Southern District. Some of this stuff here, I would imagine some of the players don't just appear in Act 1 at an inauguration or in the Trump Tower before that, or, you know, in steps 3, 4, 5, or even well before Trump was even a candidate. And they have the people here that can help, I don't know, make that connective tissue.
Oh, definitely. Between, you know, Alan Weisselberg inside the Trump organization, Rick Gates as the chairperson of the inauguration committee, you know, they've got huge visibility into all of it. They've got all the documents they seized from Michael Cohen's office and his homes. You know, and Michael Cohen was to some degree cooperating with them. Maria Butina, who was a guest at the inauguration ball, quite inappropriately, is apparently cooperating so she can give perspective on it. I mean, there's just so many witnesses pointing at Trump from so many directions. You got to believe the Trump organization is on fire at this point with witnesses inside that organization probably begging for immunity from Mr. Mueller and the Southern District so that they don't themselves become indicted. It's really a very difficult situation for Mr. Trump and his family, I believe, at this point.
And it is so, I'm sorry, taking all the politics or even the legalese, it's just so unseemly, all of this. Trying to make a buck off of an inauguration, let alone all the other things that went into it, Roland. You almost want to wash your hands of this stuff. And there's, I don't know how many different stages here that we've just identified and so many more. But as they say, stay tuned, as your old friend would say, Mr. Bahara. Roland, thank you. I am sure we'll be talking soon. There's never a dull day in the Trump world.
Good enough. Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. All right, coming up next, everybody, we're going to head over to Capitol Hill once again. Andrew's going to rejoin us. He caught up with several lawmakers to talk about both the State of the Union, the shutdown, and what we should expect to hear in 2.5 hours from our Commander-in-Chief.